During the 16-bit era, there was an explosion of mascot-driven platformers from damn near every major publisher under the sun. Even if they weren't touted as a mascot in the traditional sense, the sheer volume of anthropomorphic heroes was unreal. Most of these games were set into motion thanks to the massive success of Sonic the Hedgehog. Not only did Sega pave the way for developers who had previously been afraid to take on Nintendo's plumber, but they did it to the tune of millions of units sold, sparking a bonfire of copycats for years to follow. Among this group was Accolade's Bubsy and Claw's Encounters of the Furred Kind, a platformer starring a bobcat trying to stop aliens from stealing his yarn collection. It launched in mid-1993 to a chorus of positive press. Every major gaming publication in the US seemed to love Bubsy, and after checking while making this video, the same seemed true for most of the Euro magazines of the day. I found this odd because the modern narrative would seem to suggest that Bubsy was an awful title worthy of ridicule. What was the truth in that? And is this game worth playing today? Let's find out. As I mentioned before, the story here is about space aliens invading Earth and stealing all the yarn for their nefarious needs. None of that matters because there is no in-game cinematics playing any of that out. You do get a colorful comic story in the instruction manual, but if you are emulating this, you'll need to look it up to appreciate it. You jump right into the action collecting yarn and jumping on enemies. In fact, this is the entire gameplay hook, collecting yarn and a handful of items to help keep the game going. Bubsy is fast, nearly as fast as Sonic himself at full speed. Not to mention he can jump, glide, and bounce all over the place. That speed has an acceleration and momentum to it that causes Bubsy to slide when stopping or changing directions. It takes a bit of getting used to because it's very easy to slide into unwanted death and damage. You will want to control all this speed because the game puts enemies and obstacles right in your path. If you can't see where you're going, stop, hold the C button, and look around to see what's ahead and around you. This will save countless lives and save you a ton of frustration. While you are negotiating obstacles, you will come across yarn and crates everywhere. Hundreds of balls of yarn as far as the eye can see, and crates that contain even more. Be careful, sometimes crates can contain tacks that will kill you if you land on them. There are also banana peels that can slip Bubsy up and TNT that can blast you high into the sky. Killing your enemies is easy with a simple jump on the head. You can look up and down by pressing the directional pad while standing still. You'll come across white t-shirts that act as extra lives. There's also the black shadow shirt that makes you invisible to enemies. The white shirt with the yellow exclamation point makes you invincible. Continues are represented by the red arrows that move in a circle. There's a dedicated glide button that gives Bubsy some extra distance, which also acts as an attack if you glide into enemies. Build up a good amount of speed and you can glide quite far before you land. If you hold the jump button when you hit an enemy, you will get a boost and go higher. Moving around the level, you will find tunnels that lead to even more yarn and items. Be careful, sometimes it leads to water and an insta-death. There are also caves which have hidden areas where you can explore for more loot. The giant exclamation point you run across is the checkpoint, and since Bubsy dies with a single hit, you're gonna want to make sure you activate those every chance you get. There is a scoring system in place if you care about such things, and a timer that pushes you along. There is a 2-player mode, but it forces you to take turns once the other player dies. Finally, Bubsy has a password system, so you can return to any stage that you've defeated. Bubsy was a very decent looking video game. It was colorful, had loads of parallax and line scrolling effects, and Bubsy himself has quite a few animations. The game makes it very clear on the box, boasting its 16 megabits of ROM as one of the reasons why you just had to play it. Much of it seems to be put to good use in this regard. Bubsy has a bunch of different stages as well. There are 6 areas, with 5 of them being divided into 3 sub-stages. You'll be running and pouncing across a mountain village, an amusement fair, the Wild West, Canada, a jungle, and even a spaceship. This game is extremely fast and never seems to slow down no matter what's happening on the screen. Playing through this, I found little to complain about when it came to visuals. Of course, you know me, and I did zero in on one thing that bothered me a bit. Some of the art of this game sticks out significantly weaker than others, especially when it comes to the animation. Most of this resides in the enemies of the game. This group of misfits just don't look the part, and a few of them don't do anything but stand there and look at you. This translates into a feeling of never being threatened or pursued. These enemies are more set pieces to help you collect more yarn than bona fide dangers to be feared. Even when they do start to attack in later stages, it's nothing more than jumping in place or throwing things at you. The visuals of Bubsy are almost too cute for their own good. The sound and music in Bubsy uses Accolade's proprietary driver and fits the cutesy presentation. It didn't fill me with inspiration, nor did it irritate me, so I suppose I would call the entire audio presentation average. There's a good bit of voice work for Bubsy if you enjoy speech, though it does have the scratchiness associated with so many Genesis titles. Let's have a listen.
Hey, I thought I saw Elvis back there. Couldn't that be Fearless? Uh-oh. What could possibly go wrong?
There's really no other way to say this, so let's address it. Bubsy is a blatant Sonic clone start to finish. So many of the areas feel ripped straight from the little blue blur that you almost expect for him to show up at some point. Much of the stage design is also built for extreme speed, another element lifted from everyone's favorite spiny mammalian. Accolade obviously wanted that connection to draw in millions of fans that enjoyed Sega's flagship platformer. That in itself doesn't make Bubsy a bad game, but it certainly loses points for originality. For much of this journey, it feels like a Sonic game that isn't quite as well made. I mentioned in the graphical segment that the enemies are not well animated, nor do they present much danger that affects the gameplay. This adventure feels pedestrian at times, thanks to enemies that really don't do much. This is one of the most focused collectathons I think I've ever played. Yarn is everywhere, and every enemy, obstacle, and set piece is where it is to help you collect even more yarn. Seriously, this game needed a reduction in yarn collecting and more enemies that actually threaten the path you traveled with different attacks. Death in Bubsy comes not through well-designed enemies, but through cheap blind drops and projectiles that are fired off the screen. Bubsy also dies if he falls too far, which is just about the most ridiculous thing to add to a 2D platformer like this. I understand that the game is geared towards younger players, but by the time I got to about the halfway point, I was seriously questioning whether this was all the game had to offer. You get the rare vehicle to ride, a few hidden items to sniff out, and some caves and tunnels to explore, but everything is so hyper-focused on collecting yarn, it becomes exhausting. By World 3, I had stopped even trying to collect any of the items and was just hoofing it to the finish line to see the next area, dying for something new to do. That never came, and that there is the biggest issue with Bubsy. It's boring. Incredibly boring. It looks good, it sounds okay, and the gameplay never feels outright bad. But when it comes to what makes a platformer a standout addition to the genre, Bubsy lacks the claws to hang with the competition. The inert enemies and the endless cycle of collecting yarn hammer the fun factor for those looking for long-term fun. Not all is lost, however. If you have a younger gamer in your stable, this may well be a great game to start them with. The opening few stages are absolute cakewalks to teach them the core mechanics, and the late game allows them to flex their newfound platforming skills. It may also appeal to those just looking to kick back and enjoy a peaceful romp through a colorful world with a cutesy hero. I imagine that would mean that if you were younger when Bubsy originally launched, you likely really enjoyed this title. I myself was around 18 when I got my hands on it, a veteran of countless adventures like Shinobi, Castlevania, and Kid Chameleon, so I wanted a lot more than this game had to offer. At its heart, there's nothing especially wrong with Bubsy, it's just that what it tries other games do a lot better. He was certainly no Sonic the Hedgehog.
That's it, I'm out of here. You can't make me.
Going back to those magazine reviews I mentioned in the opening, I can understand dropping a 6 or a 7 on this and recommending it to a younger audience, but these reviews painted a picture that Bubsy could compete with the big dogs. I didn't feel that way at all and was left with a sense of disinterest before I ever saw the final stage. The enemies, the bosses, and the hook of this one just doesn't command much replay value. Hell, I'd even argue that once you beat the first few worlds, you've seen the best this adventure has to offer. Despite my personal feelings, Bubsy would sell well and spawn numerous sequels, a number of which have appeared on modern platforms some 20 plus years later. The legacy of the first one here will probably differ for many of us. While I didn't think much of it, the ease of play and heavy focus on collecting things would have made it a hit for some of you. Since it was multi-platform and appeared on both the PC and Super Nintendo, it was exposed to a wide swath of customers of all ages. Where did Bubsy fall with you? Was it a great platformer that deserved its glowing reviews? Or did you sit there like me, wondering what the hell all the praise was about? Let me know down in the comments what you think. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.